Howdo, I'm Chris, welcome to King Bespoke Creations. Today we're going to learn how to make one of these beautiful rocking horses. A perfect gift for someone special. Now, this rocking horse is actually the very first one I ever made. I made it as a wedding gift for my wife 20 years ago, and it's still looking pretty good. And the rocking horse. I was looking for a nice piece of wood to make a rocking horse out of when I suddenly realised that actually plywood can be manipulated and all of those lines can be shaped to make something completely unique and rather beautiful. I've made quite a few of these since that point, usually as gifts for the birth of a child. Quite often that would then include the letter of the name engraved in the side instead of a heart. But that's where your little flourish comes right in. So where do we start when we're going to make this out of plywood? Well, basically you can see if I come round to this angle, we've actually got 5 sections of 18mm plywood that we just need to cut out in that silhouette shape to begin with. Now, I say we're going to cut out 5, we're actually going to cut out 6. The first one will be used as a template to make sure that all the other layers are just the right size. Now you can simply do this by sketching out whatever picture you want, the silhouette that you need, straight onto that first sheet of plywood. If you would like a simple design that matches this one, I will be putting the plans for this on my Patreon page. So you'll be able to buy a very simple plan for one of these from my Patreons. If you are a Patreon member, then you'll get the plan absolutely free. Now I'm going to be using some scrap pieces of plywood from an old project. So just holding the template up in place and then kind of roughly drawing around it. For now, I'm not going to do anything detailed. And we'll just roughly cut that out. Now what that also allows us to do is place the rocking horse in a different dimension. It can go that way as well. It doesn't matter if that creates a better system for you. It doesn't matter which way around the template goes. But that will allow you to get the maximum number of horses per sheet of wood. There we go. So that's 2 out of that one little piece. So after you've gone round with the bandsaw, we're really close to that template there in most places, even making a little cut in for that little ankle section as well. And then we can just go around it with a router on a bearing and just trim round to know that every piece is going to be exactly the same size. Now I'll point out here as we're going through, these 2 screws with lots of washers in just go into the wood. They certainly don't poke out the other side. So on 4 of them, we can just go through with the screws all on the same side. On the last one, we will want to take them out and put them in from the other side so that we have a clean face on both sides of the horse. I actually like to do the first one and then swap the screws and do the others, just in case you forget, because that will be a big kick in the pants. Ask me how I know. Now, one last thing about cutting out these individual pieces is that the center one doesn't need legs or most of the ears, as that will separate the legs apart. Now notice that I've not cut them off exactly coming through there. There is a little bit of space here so that you can see on the ones that I've done, you can create that nice curve underneath. And of course then make sure you tidy up. Right. Now that we've cut all of those out, we can go ahead and glue them all together. Once they're glued up, they should look something like this. Now you can glue these in stages. You can do a couple at a time and then glue the blocks together to create one block. Or there's a little trick I like to use where you can do all of them at the same time. And that is using a couple of pieces of dowling. I've clamped one in my vise and I'm going to screw the other one just to the top of the workbench. And the way that this works is it just sits on those undersides of the horse so that while you're clamping, they're all going to sit pretty much level. Yes, you can still tweak them as you go, but it does mean you can just go clampty, clampty, clamp, all in one, go away, have a cup of tea, come back in the morning. So now we have a great big blocky horse. So now we get to do the fun bit. Now I will tell you in a million different videos, you can always use a number of different tools to perform the same job. So you could use a big heavy rasp like this to start taking off great big chunks. You can then use smaller rasps for internal diameters when you're ready to do those sections. Now for once, I'm not going to recommend using a chisel. If we take off this edge here, this layer, the grain is running in the correct direction and that would come off really nicely. The layer underneath will have the grain going at 90 degrees. So that could start blowing out from any different side as you're working with a chisel. So we're going to work with some kind of abrasive tool. Rasps, files work really well. Sanders are probably going to be your favourite option. Now, a random orbital sander like this will only get you so far. It would work around those outside edges, but as soon as we come to do any of those internal curves, that's just not going to do the job. Now, that very first horse that I made for my wife, I actually did with a big fat belt sander like this. So the flat section can do all of those outside curves around the bum, around the shoulders, all that sort of gear. But that curved area there, you can actually get tucked into a lot of those smaller inside curves, only really leaving in between the legs that just simply isn't going to fit. Now, if you've seen my channel before, you will know I love the finger sander. If you haven't seen my channel before, I love the finger sander. This is an absolute genius tool. So starting off with something heavy like a 60 grit paper, you can actually take big chunks off this and start shaping very, very quickly. I tend to start with the bum. It's the nice round part that just kind of sets off the feel of the whole horse. Once you've got that outside shape, you can then start splaying into the rest of the horse from there, tailoring the shape and starting to manipulate some of those lines. But before you get stuck in too far, do make sure that you're going to use a mask and at least some hearing protection, because you're going to be at this for quite a while and it's going to create a great mass of dust. A pair of glasses might be a good idea as well, just in case there's something that chips off. Your protection is your problem. But look after yourself, will you? So we can see fairly quickly there that we start removing layers of these plies. We can start shaping and reveal maybe a lighter layer under there as well. We could take that layer in a little bit. You can even then start to draw on where you want sections to be. So maybe I want that back leg to flow like that a little bit. And the front leg would come up and do something probably a bit like that, because that's going to have a shoulder on it that will work through and go down like that. All of that area will be dug away. Now I'm going to go ahead and say this is probably the first time you will have manipulated lines in plywood for artistic integrity. Starting off at the rump area, these bigger sections will just give you a bit of practice to go through and decide where you want to place those lines. As we get further and further down the leg, we then have these knuckles to play with, where again you can decide how many layers down you want to go, and even when the layers are fairly similar colours, you'll always have this little black ring inside plywood to really make that area pop and stand out. Now once I'm fairly happy with the shape of the back leg, yes, we're going to finesse that with a finer grit on the finger sander later. But once I'm fairly happy with the back leg, I'll then do exactly the same with the front leg. Going around the top of the shoulder, through that chest area, putting in all the same knuckles and toes and everything else that we've done on the back leg, just repeat it on the front. Then we'll move on to the next bit. And with two legs done, we're going to start looking at the head now. So again, you could be marking off with pencils that kind of jawline round onto the head. So all of this section here is actually going to go down to a really thin section. Now what I'm going to do for the ear is actually keep the ear as the widest section on the head. So I'm going to go around like that, take this down a couple of layers and start blending it into these areas, but leave the ears proud for now. And there we have 2 legs and a head with some nicely shaped ears to boot. So now we get to the fun bit where we can truly personalise each and every one of these rocking horses on the chest section. And the way that we're going to do that is to flatten this down, get ourselves a nice little framed section in the middle, which we can reduce layer by layer, and then you can put in a letter or a heart or some kind of simple shape or system in there. Whatever you fancy, you can manipulate those lines to put in whatever you want. And with that, that's side one finished. So all I'm going to do now is flip it over and repeat exactly the same steps on the other side. One thing I do like is the fact that this is the face side. That section and that section is the top sheet. So as I turn it over, I have the top sheet. So I can literally count down the number of layers to get to there, add one for that section. I can count down the number of layers here and here and here, so that we get an exact match on both sides. Here we go again. So with the horse done, sanded, it's time to have some rockers, otherwise it's not a rocking horse, is it? Now then, all I did on my very first one is lay the horse on the side, draw around on a piece of paper to make sure that it's going to curve to match the feet, and then cut that out. So this is now my template. So again, the plans that are available in the link downstairs will give you the shape that you need. Again, I would cut 3 of these out, 1 as a template and then 2 for the rocking horse itself. So there we have the 2 rockers, just cut out exactly the same way as the original silhouettes on there. All I've done so far is just smooth off the edge. These will be rounded off and nice curly bits put in there later, but I'm going to do that after it's been applied to the horse, and you'll see why in a second. I've also cut out these 2 sticks. This is about 1.25 inches thick and about 7 inches wide, and these are going to be attached to the feet on both ends, obviously, and then that's what's going to work our way through into the rockers. So take your stick, mark off the width of the plywood and mark on both ends, and then mark all the way around all 4 sides. So once the ends have been cut, the next thing is just to glue this onto the feet upside down like this. Now I used to put screws through here, which just has a nasty habit of splitting plywood, so I don't do that anymore. I use some wood glue, and to hold it in place I use some super glue as well. So with the cross beams glued on and set, we can now use those to mark off exactly where the holes need to be on the rockers. Firstly, I'm just going to put a pencil mark across the front pair just to make sure I know that that is the front, and then we don't get lost and transfer one to the other. Now that this top one is glued on, I've laid it down on the next one to mark up, making sure that as we go around that they are sitting level all the way through, so they will match as they go along. And I can now mark off these holes to make sure that everything is going to be in the right place. And then leave those to set. Looking good though. So once all the glue is set, we can just go straight back at it with that finger sander again. We're going to round off all of those edges to make them feel nice, and where the joints come in, we can make sure that it runs up nice and flat, and then start shaping those lines again to create a pretty pattern and a nice little whirly gig on the end. And with lashings of fine sanding and quite a few coats of decent clear gloss varnish, well, it does look quite beautiful, doesn't it? If you like this project, make sure you click the like, you share it with someone else, and you subscribe to the channel. Also, check out this playlist of weekend projects, because there's going to be something in there you'll enjoy doing next time. Until then, I'll see you soon. God bless.